Welcome back to PSL Living. I'm Sarah Prohaska, Public Information Officer for the City of Port St. Lucie. Right now we're going to switch gears and talk about public transit in the City of Port St. Lucie. I have David Engel from the St. Lucie Community Transit here with us, and he's going to tell us about some really awesome things that are happening in public transit in the city. Thank you, David. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me today. Before we speak about transit, I'd like to just speak about Port St. Lucie.
That's great.
I spent 2 days in a general population shelter during Hurricane Irma, and the actual quality of the city came to light for me. It was a conjunctive assistance program, and we worked with the school board, the police department, and also the county personnel. And people that, basically you see at the library, veterans assistant, the police department, all got together and we served the community. And the resiliency of Port St. Lucie isn't by chance. It's by experience as well as dedication. And
I was just saying to you, I think in times of need, Port St. Lucie's residents really come out and show their true side, which is giving and kind. And I think that you witnessed that. The children, the guest I had on right before you was Sarah from the American Red Cross, and we were talking about the same things, just how the Red Cross volunteers at those shelters really helped make a big difference too. So I'm glad that you were able to see that. How long have you lived in our community?
Well, I've lived in the Treasure Coast now for 16 years.
Okay.
And my first trip to Port St. Lucie was in 1971.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I've seen a lot of changes. And we'd like to speak about the changes that are being undertaken now and also about the future of the city.
Okay. So you've seen it way back before we have 185,000 residents. You saw it when we had
334.
Yeah, exactly. So now we're planning on how to accommodate our growing population, and one of the big things we need to think about when doing that is public transit, because not everyone can have a car or has access to a car. So public transit's really important. I know there was some exciting news that we just helped report that you were able to get a grant. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we have a number of grants that we've obtained. The most notable one recently is the fact that we've received a Florida Department of Transportation Service Development Grant for the entire transit system. And the grant is a state share of $278,000 for a 2-year pilot. And we've eliminated the fare box on all our transportation services. That includes the fixed route and our paratransit.
Okay.
This allows people to gain access to mobility services without having to shell out individual trip money.
Yeah.
And it's a big savings because a lot of the fixed route requires connections and they can be very expensive. So the floodgates are open, and we hope people pour in and use the benefit of public transit.
Free public transit now
it
for a year, right?
It's freer. I mean, essentially we save a lot of money by eliminating the fare box because there's the processing, the money, the amount of time the drivers take in between each trip, and also the banking and all the accounting things that are required. So we save about $50,000 to $70,000 eliminating the fare box. So all in, I think that we're going to increase our ridership because of a lot of the formula grants pertain to ridership. Because of the increase, we'll get more federal money. So, and we're evaluating different ways that we can fill the void of the lost fare, the residual, which we can speak about in a moment.
Okay, all right. So what some other exciting things happening on the horizon?
Well, we're giving Port St. Lucie some direct attention, and it should be getting direct attention because it is the largest city in the county, and population-wise, you're 60% of the entire county population. And based on some population projections that we've done internally, we anticipate that Port St. Lucie will be 75% of the county population inside of 10 years.
Wow.
You've got 11,000 grandfathered building permits, and you've got about another 25,000 building permits that will be on the horizon in the Tradition and South Meadow area. So it's going to be exciting. But, we just discussed the fact that I was here in 1971. Route 1 was a sleepy 2-lane road, no traffic lights. We saw a lot of cattle and a lot of people selling road art. And things are accelerating. Times are are changing, but they're changing much quicker than the past. And we have to start addressing not only the economic vitality of the region, but the quality of life and traffic congestion. So it's a challenge of transportation planners to start picking up the game and moving towards a better solution for our future.
Okay.
In the immediate future, we have some enhancements that we're undertaking here in Port St. Lucie.
Okay.
There are service development initiatives. The first thing we're going to do is initiate a new bus service. We have very limited north-south connectivity, only Route 1 right now, and we're basically connecting circulators through Fort Pierce as well as Port St. Lucie. So we're going to interconnect the two intermodals, one to the south in Port St. Lucie, to the north up in Fort Pierce. That will allow residents to get immediate access into the this IRSC, the Virginia, annex for the administration.
If they need to go to government building for some reason.
Hospital access, et cetera.
Courthouse, well, no, courthouse is in Fort Pierce.
But it'll allow a connection to the courthouse area.
Okay.
And we have a service development application before the Florida Department of Transportation now, as well as that a new service. We are also picking up the existing service and improving it. We've extended hours for routes 4, 5, and 6, which serve Port St. Lucie. Originally, the service hours were from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., and now we've increased the hours from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Oh, wow, 8. I thought it was 7, so that's even more than
we're trying to align the schedule with the Fort Pierce.
Oh, okay.
Because routes 1, 2, and 3 have that 6 to 8 schedule now. And we're also providing Saturday service to allow people to get around town if they're working on the weekend, if they need to go shopping. So that'll be a big help to get people on board with transit. Definitely. Also, we're increasing the frequency of buses on Route 1. That's our busiest bus route.
Okay.
And it was operating and still is operating with a 1-hour headway, meaning 1 hour between buses.
Okay.
And we're going to double the amount of buses on Route 1 to allow for a 30-minute headway.
Oh, perfect.
And hopefully in the future we'll get down to even 15-minute headways once we have the funding and the ability to do that.
Wow, that would be impressive.
So there's a lot of things going on. We spoke about bike share the last time we were here, and the administration here and the planning department have been very helpful. We are finalizing the location of the bus shelters. I mean, the bike share stations.
Let's remind residents what the service is. You could borrow a bike, right, and return it, and not have to.
Well, it's very simplistic. Residents that don't have a bicycle can utilize a bike share bicycle. We've streamlined the rental charges. We're only going to charge $1 an hour. So
oh, wow.
There's no barriers to use.
That's great.
And you could take the bike, you could spin it around, do whatever you want to do with it, return it at the station that you picked it up, or you could drop it off at another station.
Okay.
And our idea is to have many more stations. Right now we have approximately 5 coming in Port St. Lucie.
Okay.
But we want to increase it as we go along. We're going to seek sponsorships and cooperative ventures with area businesses.
Oh, that's great.
And we have two of the stations, one located in Tradition, the other is Civic Center. We're finalizing the locational negotiations now.
Getting that all in place.
And we should have everything up and running by around Veterans Day.
Okay.
I promised you Christmas, and we're trying to accelerate
There you go. Either way, it's cooler time of year, so I'm sure people will be excited to do some bike riding during November and December.
Or if they want to catch a bus and it's too hot to walk, they can ride a bike.
There you go. That's perfect. You ride a bike and then get a bus. No need for a car at all.
We had another program called Direct Connect, which provides demand response attention to the transportation disadvantage of seniors, people with handicaps, and also financially disadvantaged residents. And that service is delivering trips. And, we count trips, but it's really, if you look at each trip, it means a difference in somebody's life. Their ability to go to a job, to get education, to go to health care, go to the food market.
Yeah.
So it's making a difference in people's lives. We finalized with Lyft, so we have our first transportation network company participating. Actually, the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners executed the service agreement.
Okay.
And we are having a kickoff meeting with Lyft this week. So we will be providing Lyft trips through the Direct Connect program within the next week or so.
And if someone watching has never used this before and they are interested in signing up for that, are there requirements?
There are requirements, 60 years or older.
Okay.
If you have a handicap, and also if your income's constrained, and we go up to 250% of the national poverty level to give enough, as many people as possible to give them mobility services and choice.
Okay. Any Port St. Lucie resident who meets the requirements, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So what else do we have going on?
Well,
I know you're working on a lot of stuff.
We are working on a lot of things. One of the most exciting things that I do is look into the crystal ball.
Okay.
And so we have a big project going on in Silvitz Road. It's in the unincorporated area, just north of the St. James neighborhood. The county owns approximately 27 acres located at Energy Lane in Silvitz Road. It was a dedicated parcel.
Okay.
And we are planning to have a centralized transit headquarters and maintenance yard there. And a lot of people say, well, why would you want to spend the money, where we have many needs throughout the community? So we evaluated the project on a financial analytical basis, and we determined that we would spend about we would save about $75,000 a year in hard operating money if we constructed this facility.
Okay.
And we have a FTA 5339 grant application in right now before the FTA.
Okay.
And if it is,
and that's the Florida, just for people who don't realize.
Well, that's the
FTA.
Federal Transit Administration. It's a federal program.
Okay.
And it's an 80% federal, 20% local match. Now,
perfect.
The Florida Department of Transportation has agreed to give us toll revenue credits for 10% of the local match.
Oh, so a lot of that is coming from
outside sources.
Yes.
So the bottom line here is the county would put up 10% of $3.8 million. So saving $75,000 a year, the break even is about 4.5 years.
Okay.
And based on a 10-year rate of return analysis, it's over 12% a year. I mean, that's a pretty good investment for hard dollars.
Okay.
So those funds can be repurposed and used for other programs and benefits to the community.
Perfect.
So that's very exciting.
So when is that? Do you have an estimated timeline on that?
This morning, the Board of County Commissioners was considering an RFQ recommendation. From the Purchasing Department Selection Committee, which I'm the project manager on. And if they approve it, and hopefully they did approve our recommendation, we'll have a short list of 3 engineering firms, and we'll proceed. So that'll take about a year, and if we obtain the FTA grant, we could begin construction in 2019.
Oh wow! Okay, so not too long, in a year or so. Okay.
Pursuant to that,
if everything works out.
Of course.
Yes.
Pursuant to the Silvitz Road headquarters facility, which is a regional facility, before we even proceeded with that, the county administrator, Howard Tipton, charged us with evaluating whether we even need it.
Okay.
What is transportation services going to look like in the future?
Okay.
And how cost effective is the expenditure, and what is the longevity and useful life of the facility?
Okay.
So it was a great exercise.
Yeah.
Mariah Deacle, the transit manager, and myself did an extensive analysis, and we realized that transportation is changing, and changing very rapidly. Right now, we have 2 levels of service in the county. We have paratransit, which is a 24-hour and advanced reservation system for seniors and handicapped. And we have the fixed route. But we've noted that, I'll put it to you this way. The 2 biggest questions I get asked from when I'm out in the community is, number 1, why are you running buses with nobody in them? And number 2 is, why don't you have a bus that can help me out? Okay. So it's kind of a dichotomy.
Yes, exactly.
And you really have to look at the history of transit in the United States. If you look at third world countries, you notice that they have many more transit vehicles that are smaller. The reason is that labor costs are a lot less overseas. Okay. So we've actually delivered transit through the fixed route because it's really the cheapest way to deliver transportation by the mile. Okay. But unfortunately, unless you live within a half a mile walk from a bus stop, you can't use it. And the fixed route is designed for peak hour, so off-peak, sometimes it appears that nobody's riding the bus. And this is a condition throughout the United States. It's not unique to Port St. Lucie. So because of technology and because of new software innovations, we're able to actually capture new types of services to fill the void and make sure that people get around where they want to go and the buses aren't that empty. Okay. And so anyway, our analysis of the future looked at a revolution in transportation, but we identified there's an evolution to it.
Okay.
There's 3 phases of change. The first phase is the demand response, we'll speak about in a moment, which will be the 3rd level of service that we provide to our community. And the next 2 levels are propulsion, which is through going from a combustion engine to electric vehicles.
Oh, okay.
And the ultimate leg of advancement will be autonomous vehicles. So everybody sees what's going on in the world of transportation. You see Uber and Lyft; they're disruptive to the transportation area. But you have to really understand their business models and what they do.
Yeah.
First of all, a lot of cities are finding out that Uber is not eliminating congestion; they're actually adding to it in highly traffic areas.
Okay.
Because you have single occupancy vehicles, you just have a driver and you're not operating the vehicle yourself. So that's one aspect of a problem that it's not resolving or solving. The second problem is their business model. Every trip that Uber makes is a subsidized trip. It's subsidized through the venture capitalists that have financed the company.
Okay.
So the more trips they render, the larger their cash burn is and the more money they lose. In 2016, Uber lost $1.7 billion in money, and that cash burn is growing. So they have to make a decision. What are we going to do with the future? Are we going to raise rates? Are we going to, diminish the amount of compensation we have to drivers? And that's been problematic.
Okay.
So it's kind of a quagmire. And for public agencies, we can't rely on the private sector because there's no longevity. And also, they're a profit-making organization. We have different goals. So what can we do about that? Well, the algorithm that drives Lyft and Uber has been adapted throughout the country, especially for medical types of trips.
Okay.
And many cities are now adopting a rideshare program using the TNC model.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, I'll give you an example. In Florida, the Lynx Transit Agency, which operates the Orlando. area, okay, so they in 2014, they received a mobility on-demand grant through for the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration.
Okay.
And they started operating this pilot program for one neighborhood where there'll be demand response. There'll be vans picking up people and dropping them off within a certain neighborhood.
Okay.
And then if they want to leave the neighborhood, they'll be delivered to the fixed route.
Oh, okay. So it would give them a ride to the
fixed route.
Stop. Yeah.
Or if you want to make a local trip to go to the Publix or something like that, you got curb-to-curb service. Okay. The program became so popular, now they have 13 districts from one in a matter of 3 years.
Wow.
And the results have been very promising because more people are using the fixed route because they have to get access to it.
They can get to it,
and the ridership is blossoming and the public is happy.
Okay. So do you foresee that in our future here?
I do, and their program is actually evolving as we speak because initially it was a 1 hour or to 2 hour in advance reservation system, and now they're going to real time using an Uber type of software algorithm.
Like using an app or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And the city of Kansas City, which is one of the most dispersed suburban cities in the United States, they're adapting to a new demand response system with a joint venture with Ford Motor Company.
Okay.
And some cities, like Flint, Michigan, are discontinuing their fixed route altogether and going to a demand response model. Okay. So I don't want to be that bold.
But you definitely have this on your...
But there are tools, it's on our radar.
Yeah.
and we're investigating the possibilities now.
Okay.
And what we'd like to do is institute a pilot in the Tradition area. The Tradition area is a great area because you have an indigenous population, you have a daytime population because of the medical facility there, Kaiser University, the jobs, the shopping. And also the Florida Department of Transportation has been going to be constructing an $8.1 million major regional park and ride facility on the east side of the interchange on 95.
Okay.
So you have a lot of activity there that can support a demand response program. So the operator is allowing us to use 2 MV1 vehicles, vans. Okay. And we have a service development grant right now. In place, and we also have we are also going to be submitting as of November 1st another operating grant through the through the National Academy of Science.
All right, so this is happening.
It is happening.
So in Tradition is going to be kind of the testing area.
It is. We'd like to operate for 2 years. Okay. And we'd like to expand it if it's successful into the St. Lucie West area to relieve the traffic congestion up there. And also deliver some services to, there's a McKesson call center and also the resort destination.
Okay.
So we'll see how it goes. But, it's people say, well, how can you provide this service? It's very expensive. And you just said recently and just before that the fixed route is cheaper. Well, you have to look at the totality of our system. Right now, paratransit ambulatory trips cost $17.80 a trip. And this app-driven type of ride share will cost approximately $8 to $9 all in a trip. So we'll save there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of seniors that use our paratransit, but it's not always convenient to them. If they're going to the doctor or some longer term trip, it works fine. But what happens if they want a spontaneous trip in their life?
Yeah,
what happens if they want to go to the Publix and they have to wait 30, 40 minutes for the van to pick them up and their ice cream is melting?
Yeah, their food's all.
So this will provide immediate transportation. And we're hoping to lure a lot of the ambulatory healthy seniors out of the paratransit into the ride share basket.
Yeah.
So maybe our average trip delivered throughout the county will be similar to what it is now, but we'll have a third tier of service. And not only will it help people with life-sustaining trips, but it also could be transformative to people's future.
Yeah, it would be a whole new way of a whole lifestyle change for people almost. Yeah.
Well, it is, and also it'll relieve traffic congestion.
Yes.
We're not Uber.
Yeah.
And here's the trade-off. We'd like to pick up people at common collection points that are convenient. So it'll be cyber bus stops all over your area and drop them off. And the software actually is intuitive. It actually learns from trip experience, so it can identify where people go and where they are picked up. And we can actually start scheduling trips accordingly. And even though Uber is cheaper than taxis, it's for most people it's still very expensive. I'll give you an example. I was up in Orlando at a conference, and I didn't feel like spending a lot of money on the hotel food. So I wanted to go to a local restaurant 5 minutes away, and I didn't feel like driving. So I did the Uber thing. I did Econo Uber. It was 5 minutes from the hotel, and it would have been a $14 round trip experience. So I ended up driving.
Yeah.
So basically, we want to make this type of service in a rideshare type of program. Affordable to the community.
And accessible to people who can't pay $14 for a 5-minute trip.
That's correct. So everybody is so excited about the future. We've looked at electric buses. And in fact, we actually did a very extensive cost-benefit analysis. And we found that the electric buses still are too expensive. The manufacturers are justifying the expense based on federal subsidies. But if we get federal subsidies for all our buses. So it wasn't cost effective at this time. And Florida is in an attainment area. We've met the National Clean Air Act requirements, so we're not pressured to use different types of clean alternatives. But as soon as the electric vehicles are cost effective, which will be probably 3 to 5 years, we're going to migrate this demand response system into electric vehicles. So the next step is, what about autonomous? We're hearing all these exciting things. Congress is considering autonomous vehicles. We see a lot of partnerships in the private sector. And we've looked at autonomous very closely, and it's a very expensive new innovation. First of all, you have to repurpose all the streets and right-of-ways. You have to put certain types of striping down. And there's no funding for this type of improvement. Secondly, the technology is advancing, but it is not it's not 100%.
Yeah, we're not there yet. No.
Right now, autonomous vehicles run with a LiDAR radar system, and then they have sensors that are redundantly placed around the vehicle for backup. The problem is what happens if you're in a snowstorm up in Michigan, or you're down here in one of our rainy season squalls. The system isn't redundant anymore. And another thing is that what happens when a first responder vehicle has its sirens coming up to the rear and it doesn't hear?
There's a lot of work left on that, but we are actually running out of time. Thank you for I know you have a lot to talk about, but we'll have you back on. And we definitely want to keep track of the pilot program and tradition. because that's really exciting for.
Or we can do a remote show.
We can definitely do that once we get that going in the bikes. We're very excited about the bike sharing out in Port St. Lucie too.
Thank you for having me today.
But I appreciate you coming on and sharing all your knowledge about you. You certainly are an expert, and we're very appreciative for you to come on and share all your knowledge about public transit with us. And we are excited about everything that's happening in public transit in Port St. Lucie, and we appreciate your investment into our community. So thank you so much for coming on, and we will be right back after these messages.